The day started like any other Tuesday, a total zoo. If you haven't been in a work from arcade office, imagine a co-working space that decided to install 4 full-sized pinball machines, a vintage Donkey Kong cabinet, and a rotating soft-serve ice cream machine, all within earshot of people trying to take serious corporate calls. That's where I, Rosa Ford, spent my days. My husband, Alex Ford, worked there too. Same company, same floor, just a few desks over. We liked it, mostly because it was quirky, and honestly, the free coffee was amazing. Plus, being able to walk over and steal a high five from Alex between deadlines felt like a little cheat code for a happy marriage. But on this particular Tuesday, the cheat code glitched. Alex had rushed out for a meeting with a client, the kind that was supposedly super top secret and definitely not near a decent taco truck, which, looking back, was already suspicious. He left his desk in a typical Alex mess, a crumpled energy bar wrapper, a notebook open to a doodle of a surprisingly accurate unicorn, and his work laptop still open. Now, let me be clear, I'm not a snoop. I promise. Our relationship was the kind that had been through college finals, moving across state lines twice, and assembling 3 bookshelves with 0 fights. We had an unspoken rule of trust. But when I went over to grab my pen, I swear I left it on his desk, my eyes snagged on the screen. It was an instant message window, a chat with a colleague named Maya. I knew Maya. Everyone knew Maya. She was the one Alex always referred to as his work friend. And every time he said it, he'd use this overly casual, breezy tone that felt about as convincing as a politician promising to lower taxes. She was new to the company, bubbly, and wore these effortlessly cool vintage t-shirts. She was, in short, the perfect person to disrupt a very comfortable 10-year relationship. I had been noticing their dynamic for months. The lingering post-meeting chats, the just grabbing coffee runs that took 45 minutes, the inside jokes that flew over my head faster than a jet plane. Alex had always brushed off my low-key anxiety with his go-to line, "Rosa, she's just a friend." We collaborate a lot. It's work. But the message on the screen wasn't about Q3 projections or the Office Fantasy Football League. It was a single, cryptic line from Maya. Same time tonight? That little sentence, innocent as it might sound out of context, hit me like a rogue pinball machine flipper to the gut. Same time tonight? Not. Do you have time to finish that report? Or can we hop on a quick call? No. It was intimate, prearranged, and sounded like a regular occurrence. The air left my lungs so fast I felt dizzy. The Donkey Kong machine chimed cheerily in the background, a jarring contrast to the internal siren that was wailing in my head. I stood there, frozen, the entire open-plan office a blur of tapping keyboards and distant laughter. The question wasn't if something was happening. The question was, what was I going to do about it? The old me, the pre-work from arcade me, would have slammed the laptop shut, stormed off, and waited for Alex to come home so I could unleash a torrent of accusatory tears. But 10 years teaches you a few things. It teaches you that some battles you need to fight with your brain, not your heart. I didn't want a scene. I didn't want a confrontation fueled by emotion that he could just twist and deny. I needed proof, and I needed to expose the lie, not just the action. I needed the truth to hit him like a level boss he couldn't defeat. A tiny, wicked idea began to form. It was risky. It was maybe a little crazy. It definitely violated the trust part of our 10-year pact. But what about his violation? Didn't that give me a pass? I took a deep breath, the recycled office air smelling faintly of stale pizza and the soft-serve machine's vanilla swirl. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. If I sent a reply from Alex's account, he would never know I had seen the message. Maya would get the response, and the trap would be set. I wouldn't just be reacting to a betrayal, I'd be controlling the narrative. My heart hammered against my ribs. A fast, frantic rhythm, only slightly slower than the flashing lights on the nearby pinball machine. This was the point of no return. I was about to dive headfirst into a conflict that could either save my marriage or blow it to smithereens. But the alternative, to sit and silently wait and wonder, was a kind of slow death I couldn't endure. I needed to know the truth, and apparently I was going to have to engineer the moment of discovery myself. I have a quick request for you, if you're listening right now. Drop a comment and tell me the time and place you're watching this video. Are you scrolling through on the couch? Are you hiding in a closet at work? I want to know. I leaned in, my mind racing through scenarios, arguments, and excuses. I was no longer just Rosa, the mild-mannered graphic designer. I was Rosa, the undercover operative, and the target was right there on the screen. The single, suspicious message was my starting gun. Now, it was time to run the race. The mouse clicked. The cursor blinked. The deception began. The decision to reply was one thing, actually committing to it was another. My hands were shaking a little as I finally pulled up a chair to Alex's desk. The work from arcade office was humming with the late-morning energy, a low-level buzz of collaboration, and the occasional thwack of a pinball machine. It was a soundtrack of normal life, which made the conspiracy unfolding on Alex's screen feel even more surreal. I looked at the message again. Same time tonight? Maya had sent it, and it was waiting for a reply from Alex Ford. I needed to paint a picture of our shared life, a life she was clearly trying to fracture, but in a way that wouldn't immediately make Alex suspicious when he returned. He was supposed to be in a client meeting, which meant I had at least another 40 minutes of covert operation time. I opened up a new message draft, keeping my reply casual, in his typically slightly goofy tone. I started typing, mimicking the way he'd often agree to things with me. I imagined him typing it, distracted, maybe already thinking about what he was going to order for lunch. My reply, sent from Alex's account, was simple and devastatingly effective. Sure. My wife's coming too. I reread it 3 times, a slow, predatory smile spreading across my face. It was perfect. It wasn't accusatory. It wasn't vague. It was a firm, unambiguous statement. Rosa is part of the plan. If this meeting was innocent, as Alex insisted all their interactions were, then my presence shouldn't be a problem for Maya. She should reply, great. The more the merrier, or awesome, looking forward to catching up with Rosa. But if it was what I feared, a clandestine rendezvous, that one sentence would throw a tactical grenade into their entire operation. I quickly minimized the chat window and spent an intense minute clearing the history, or at least making it look like Alex had done a sloppy job of clearing it himself, just enough plausible deniability to cover my tracks. Then I sat back, heart pounding, waiting for the fallout. While I waited, I thought about how we got here. Alex and I met in college. We were the classic opposites attract. He was the spontaneous engineer who saw every problem as a puzzle. I was the methodical designer who saw every puzzle as needing a clearly labeled instruction manual. For the past decade, that friction had created sparks, not fires. We'd moved to the city 2 years ago for his job promotion. It was a fresh start that, ironically, led him right to Maya. The setting of our shared office, the work from arcade, was supposed to be a fun, relaxed environment. It was designed to foster creativity and collaboration. But the laid-back atmosphere seemed to have blurred the boundaries too, turning professional relationships into something dangerously intimate. It made the situation feel less like a formal affair and more like a casual, slippery slide into betrayal. Maya was introduced to me weeks ago at a company mixer. She was everything I was not. Vibrant red hair, a laugh that carried across the room, and an encyclopedic knowledge of obscure 90s cartoons that Alex found endlessly charming. I remember distinctly my first impression of her. She was wearing a t-shirt with a picture of a crocodile and sunglasses and the slogan, "Don't forget the crocodile dung sunscreen." Alex had laughed so hard he choked on his beer. I remember thinking, okay, she's funny, but also, why is my husband finding a coworker this charming? Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen? It became the ultimate inside joke, another thing they shared that excluded me. That's the thing about emotional affairs. They're built on tiny, seemingly insignificant moments, like a shared joke, a lingering glance, or a private text about same time tonight. It's a slow bleed, not a sudden stab, and I was tired of bleeding. I checked the screen again. No reply yet. My nervous energy was making it impossible to focus on my actual work, which involved designing a new logo for a startup that sold organic dog treats. The irony of me, the loyal wife, sitting here plotting a deception while trying to brand loyalty, was not lost on me. I tried to calm myself by listing the hard evidence. 0 physical proof, only circumstantial data, a gut feeling, and now that text. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe they were meeting to discuss a top-secret client project over non-taco truck dinner. But the secrecy, the constant defense from Alex, and the late-night texting that always mysteriously stopped when I walked into the room? It all screamed louder than the pew-pew sounds from the retro video games nearby. A new message notification popped up. It was from Maya. My breath hitched. This was it. The moment of truth. My heart was a frantic drum solo. I leaned forward. The screen was bright, the text message, thread illuminated like a neon sign in the otherwise dim corner of the office. Her reply was shorter than I expected. No exclamation points. No breezy humor. It was just one word. Seriously. The message was a tight, defensive knot of annoyance and disbelief. It was the absolute opposite of an innocent response. If they were just friends, why the hostility? Why the question mark? It confirmed everything. The meeting was not meant for me. The friendship was a lie. Alex's dismissal of my fears was a deliberate deception. That one word, seriously, fueled my resolve and simultaneously broke a small part of my heart. The time for tears was over. The time for action had begun. I quickly closed the laptop, placing my pen back on Alex's desk, as if I'd just stopped by for a moment. Operation Shutdown was officially a go. Maya's one-word reply, seriously, wasn't a question. It was a complaint. It was the sound of a carefully constructed secret being dropped onto a hard floor. And for Rosa Ford, sitting in the organized chaos of the work from arcade office, it was all the confirmation I needed to shift from suspicion to execution. The just a friend vibe that Alex had constantly thrown my way? It was officially certified crocodile dung, much like the sunscreen Maya's t-shirt had joked about. Remember that? Now the joke was on them. I locked Alex's laptop and placed it back exactly where he'd left it. My hands were steady now. The initial shock had burned off, replaced by a cold, razor-sharp focus. I needed to build my case. This couldn't be a hysterical outburst. It had to be a meticulously documented, procedural shutdown. The first layer of conflict was the blatant dishonesty. It wasn't just the fact that they were meeting in secret. It was the months of gaslighting, of Alex minimizing my feelings and assuring me that his bond with Maya was purely work. Work. Every time I brought it up, he'd get that slight defensive edge in his voice, the one that said, "You're being dramatic, Rosa." Now I knew I wasn't dramatic. I was perceptive. That was the primary problem. The erosion of trust within my marriage, the main column holding up my life. The secondary challenge, however, was the environment itself. The work from arcade setting was part of the problem. It fostered a dangerously casual atmosphere. The lines between professional and personal were constantly smudged by pinball tournaments, shared ice cream breaks, and late-night work sessions fueled by craft beer. In a traditional, stiff office, this dynamic might have been harder to ignore. Here, it was simply the culture. This made the betrayal not a dramatic public affair, but an insidious, low-key secret that flourished in the ambiguity of the office's playful setting. How could I prove a betrayal in a place where having an office spouse was practically a rite of passage? This introduced the moral dilemma. My plan, to impersonate Alex in a text message and set up a confrontation, was deceitful. It was a breach of our marital trust, even if he was the primary violator. I was fighting dishonesty with dishonesty. Was I becoming the very thing I despised? I took a long walk to the coffee station, passing a group of coworkers intensely focused on a game of air hockey. The clatter and slap of the puck gave me a moment to think. I decided that this was a necessary evil. I wasn't planning a career of lies. I was executing a one-time surgical strike to uncover a devastating truth. The alternative was a protracted, agonizing period of doubt and subtle denial, which would destroy me more effectively than any immediate confrontation. The stake was my sanity and self-respect. If I didn't confront this decisively, I'd forever wonder if I was the crazy wife or the victim of deceit. My plan began to form its final shape. I had to assume that Alex was not just having an emotional affair, but that he was also leveraging their close working relationship. I needed something solid, something that bypassed the emotional, she said, and appealed to the objective, professional reality of the situation. I needed leverage that mattered more than my tears. The more I thought about their work connection, the more I realized I had to hit them where it hurt, their professional lives. Alex and Maya were on a high-stakes project together. If their personal entanglement was affecting their work, or worse, creating a hostile environment for other colleagues who might have noticed their behavior. That was a violation of company policy, not just a marriage vow. I returned to my desk, my mind buzzing not with romantic grievance, but with corporate policy. I started quietly researching the company's code of conduct and the HR process for reporting improper workplace relationships and conflicts of interest. The company had a very clear, very strict policy regarding fraternization that impacted the work environment. I opened a new, private document. I began documenting everything: the excessive time spent together, the defensive excuses, the timestamps of the texts, which I had taken a discreet photo of before minimizing the chat, and the clear intent of the "same time tonight" message coupled with the telling response of "seriously" to my inclusion. I didn't make accusations of anything physical. I focused strictly on the facts. Inappropriate, secretive communication between a married employee and a coworker that created a conflict of interest and a potentially hostile environment. This was the rising tension. I wasn't just planning a scene at a restaurant. I was constructing a formal, corporate investigation. My anger had transformed into cold, bureaucratic precision. I was filing for divorce from the lie, and I was using the company's rules as my legal aid. I felt a strange sense of power, not the destructive power of a scorned wife, but the constructive power of someone taking control of her own narrative. The emotional stakes were astronomical, but the process I was undertaking was chillingly calm. I was preparing the ultimate insurance policy. Tomorrow, I would confront them, but today I was making sure that when I showed up, I wasn't just bringing my anger, I was bringing the official hammer of HR. The moment I hit send on the chat reply, the curt "seriously" from Maya still burning in my mind, the story shifted from a marital disagreement into a full-blown tactical operation. My initial rage had solidified into a cold, methodical determination. I realized I couldn't just react to Alex's betrayal. I had to orchestrate the downfall of his lie. The message, sure, "my wife's coming too," was the centerpiece of my high-stakes, deceptive plan, and the rest of the afternoon was dedicated to making sure the trap was inescapable. This section is all about the quiet planning, the necessary deceit, and the mental gymnastics I had to perform to justify my actions. I knew, absolutely, that what I was doing was not the right, or healthy way to handle things. A good therapist would have told me to demand an explanation, to communicate openly, to maybe not impersonate my husband to set up a confrontation. But frankly, I was past caring about healthy. Alex had poisoned the well of our trust with months of lies and dismissals, and I wasn't going to wade into that mess unarmed. The immediate challenge was anticipating their next move. Maya's single-word reply suggested annoyance, but not alarm. She hadn't immediately messaged back, "Wait, what?" or "I can't talk in front of your wife." This told me two things. First, that her contact with Alex was probably limited to that chat platform during office hours, making my covert action hard to track instantly. Second, and more importantly, she might actually believe that Alex, in some insane fit of misplaced guilt or a sudden burst of honesty, had decided to bring me along to whatever their meeting was. The ambiguity of the reply, was it annoyance at my presence or annoyance at Alex's sudden change of heart, was my shield. I spent an hour meticulously cleaning up my own desk at the work from arcade office, a distraction that helped me focus. I needed to know the where and when of their meeting. I couldn't just show up randomly. If Alex was truly planning to meet her in secret, he would have either ignored my chat or subtly deleted it before leaving the office. But he was scheduled to be out of the office all afternoon. I took a calculated risk. I quickly checked his shared work calendar, which was linked to mine for team projects. And there it was, a cryptic entry for 7 p.m. Client check-in, the corner booth. The corner booth wasn't a client. It was that annoyingly trendy, dimly lit bar 3 blocks from the office, the kind of place that served $18 cocktails and played 80s synth pop. It was the perfect, anonymous, slightly romantic spot for two people who shouldn't be together to have a work chat. It was also where they'd met for drinks with a group once, which gave him just enough cover to call it a client check-in. My plan snapped into place. I had the time, the location, and the necessary deception. But the emotional turmoil was immense. This wasn't a game of pinball, this was my life. I kept running over the memory of Alex's face when he assured me, "She's just a friend, Rosa." I remember that time months ago when I first started feeling insecure and he'd hug me tightly and said, "You are my whole world. Don't be silly." That hug, that sentence, it was all a lie, a performance he gave me while, perhaps, exchanging inside jokes with Maya about crocodile dung sunscreen. Every casual lie, every dismissive wave of his hand, was now a sharp piece of glass in my gut. The deceit I employed, replying from his account, felt justified by the gravity of his long-term emotional deceit. I wasn't inventing a lie. I was merely manipulating the existing deceit to reveal itself. I was forcing the invisible emotional betrayal into a physical space where it couldn't be denied. It was a dirty trick, yes, but it was the only way to get a clean answer. As the afternoon wore on, I felt the strange, cold clarity. I wasn't fighting for Alex anymore. I was fighting for Rosa Ford. I was fighting for the 10 years of my life that I deserve the truth about. My decision to reply as him, to set the trap, wasn't about revenge. It was about self-preservation. It was about forcing accountability, which a simple, tearful confrontation would never have achieved. That evening, Alex would have to face not just a heartbroken wife, but the consequences of his own, carefully chosen words that I had momentarily hijacked to save myself. I was prepared for the fallout, prepared for the marriage to end. I was, however, not prepared for the HR report I was about to file. That was the real game changer. My reply to Maya, sent from Alex's account, "Sure, my wife's coming too," was a stone dropped into their carefully placid pond. Her reply, "Seriously," confirmed the ripples were exactly what I thought they were. Now I had to solidify the plan and deal with the gnawing moral ambiguity. I had done the immediate, necessary deception, but now came the hard work, preparation and emotional defense. The moral tightrope I was walking was thin. I had violated a core tenet of our relationship, trust. But as I sat there, watching the retro Donkey Kong machine flash its colorful denial of my reality, I had to remind myself that trust was a two-way street that Alex had demolished first. He hadn't just met someone for dinner. He had spent months creating an entire narrative of denial, minimizing my feelings, and emotionally sidelining me. His deceit was a slow burn. My deception was a flash fire necessary for immediate visibility. I justified it as an act of self-preservation, not malice. I wasn't setting out to destroy him. I was setting out to save myself from the destruction he was already enacting. The deeper problem was that Alex, being Alex, would likely try to spin the situation. If I showed up without proof, he would use my deception against me. "Why did you reply from my account, Rosa? You're invading my privacy. You're controlling. You're the problem here." I could hear the words echoing in the back of my mind, the classic deflection tactics of a guilty person. I needed to ensure that when I arrived at the corner booth, the focus would snap back to his actions, not mine. This is where the plan escalated. I realized the confrontation couldn't just be a marital argument. It had to be a professional intervention. The work from Arcade office had blurred the lines, and now I was going to use the company's own structure to reestablish them. I didn't want to just ruin his night. I needed to create consequences that he couldn't simply lie his way out of. I went back to the company's HR portal. Earlier, I had been documenting the situation, but now I was ready to file. This was the turning point in the entire drama. I wasn't just a scorned wife anymore. I was a reporting colleague, acting on an observed violation of the company's code of conduct. I filed an anonymous report. I didn't want my name on it yet, as that would give Alex a chance to anticipate me, detailing the following. Conflict of interest / improper fraternization. I outlined the excessive, non-essential contact between Alex Ford and Maya, citing the secretive meeting arrangement, same time tonight, as evidence of inappropriate personal entanglement that could compromise a high-stakes team project they were both on. Creation of a hostile / uncomfortable work environment. I stated that the observed behaviors and secretive communication were causing discomfort and distraction among other employees, a slight exaggeration, perhaps, but certainly true for me, a coworker. Abuse of company resources. I briefly mentioned the use of company communication channels for clandestine personal rendezvous. I attached the photographic evidence of Maya's initial message and her defensive reply, "Seriously," noting the context of the calendar invite for client check-in, the corner booth at 7 p.m. This HR report was cold, objective, and procedural. It took all the raw, messy emotion of my 10-year marriage and distilled it into corporate bullet points. After I clicked submit, I received an automated confirmation with a case number. I printed that confirmation email, just the one page, folded neatly into my purse. This piece of paper, this administrative receipt, was my shield, my sword, and my ultimate proof. Remember that HR report? It was filed, sealed, and ready to deploy. No matter what happened at the bar, the corporate process had begun. The truth was now documented in a system far more impartial than my own emotional one. The physical act of filing that report was strangely freeing. It was the moment I stopped being passive and became active. It took the entire weight of my broken trust and transferred it to an official, actionable process. Alex finally wandered back into the office, his client meeting apparently concluded. He looked oblivious, grabbing a cup of coffee and chatting loudly with a colleague about the new high score on the pinball machine. He walked right past his laptop, the scene of my crime, and didn't even glance at it. He was operating in a fog of comfortable deception, completely unaware of the bureaucratic bomb I had just dropped on his career and his marriage. He walked over to my desk, leaning down to give me a peck on the cheek. "Hey, babe," he said, his voice cheerful. "Big project tonight, gotta work late." "Don't wait up." That was the lie, served up with a kiss. I met his eyes, my expression carefully blank. "Got it, sweetie. Good luck with the client check-in." I even managed a small, convincing smile. The lie was out there, and he had just confirmed his commitment to it. He was walking right into the trap. All I had to do now was wait for 7 p.m. The wait for 7 p.m. felt like trying to hit a game-winning shot with the clock frozen at 0. After Alex left the work from arcade office with his cheerful, completely false "gotta work late" excuse, I was left alone with my thoughts, the heavy silence amplifying the ethical concerns of my plan. This internal wrestling match was more exhausting than any confrontation could ever be. I had justified the deception, the hijacked text message, and the covert HR filing as a necessary evil for self-preservation. But was I truly acting with integrity, or was I simply using my hurt as a license for tactical malice? The dilemma was deep and unsettling, like looking into a funhouse mirror of my own moral code. My entire life with Alex Ford had been built on the premise of honesty, often painfully direct honesty. Now, I was a spy in my own marriage. This moral paradox was the deepest, most layered conflict of the whole situation. Was the truth I was about to uncover worth the lie I had to tell to get it? I decided it was. A truth uncovered by deceit is still a truth, and the core lie, "She's just a friend, Rosa," was his, not mine. I was merely holding a mirror up to his deception and forcing him to see its reflection. My next step, and perhaps the most difficult emotionally, was preparing for the outcome. I had to face the very real possibility that my marriage of 10 years would end tonight. This wasn't a game of Donkey Kong where I could just press the reset button. The HR report was filed. The trap was set. The confrontation was inevitable. I had created an action that was permanent. I went home briefly, not to change into a dramatic revenge outfit, but into something that made me feel steady and self-possessed. A simple blazer and jeans. I needed to look like Rosa Ford, the composed professional, not the heartbroken wife. As I drove toward the corner booth, the emotional stakes reached a fever pitch. My mind kept cycling through Alex's excuses. He would say I was crazy. He would say I was controlling. He would say it was just a few drinks, and that I had ruined his career over nothing. I had to preemptively dismantle those defenses. The HR report was my defense. It meant that even if he successfully convinced me that I was overreacting in the heat of the moment, a formal process was already underway. This wasn't about my emotions. It was about the company's rules, the conflict of interest, and his abuse of the work from arcade office culture. That administrative record was an objective third party. I pulled into a parking spot a block away from the bar, the corner booth. I checked my phone. 6:52 p.m. 8 minutes to showtime. My stomach was churning, but my hands were still steady. I took a moment to reflect on my own role in all of this. Had I been too complacent? Had I taken our 10 years of marriage for granted? Maybe. But that didn't excuse his choice to lie and to pursue this secretive emotional intimacy with Maya. He was the one who prioritized a thrill and a lie over the sanctity of our partnership. My fight wasn't against Maya, not really. It was against the dishonesty that had taken root in my marriage. The moral dilemma was ultimately resolved by my focus on self-respect. I deserved a clean break from the lie, and a swift, decisive exposure was the fastest way to get it. I wasn't seeking petty vengeance. I was seeking undeniable clarity. I checked my small purse. Inside, the folded printout of the HR confirmation email felt like a winning lottery ticket. It wasn't the physical evidence of an affair, but it was the professional evidence of a violation, which, in the context of their shared project and company policy, was arguably more damaging and harder to deny. I had transitioned from fighting a personal battle to executing a professional consequence. This was the shift from wife to accuser, from emotional to procedural. As I walked towards the neon glow of the corner booth sign, I practiced my lines, not of anger, but of cold, hard fact. I wasn't going to cry or scream. I was going to deliver a notice. I was going to look them both in the eye and deliver the consequences of their choices. The air was cool, but I felt a heat radiating from my own internal furnace of resolve. The turning point was here. I was ready to face the music, no matter how discordant the tune. I walked into the corner booth just as the clock on my phone ticked over to 7:01 p.m. The bar was exactly as I pictured. Dim lighting, loud 80s music. Tonight it was some forgotten synth-pop track, and a general air of trying too hard to look casual. It was the perfect stage for a clandestine meeting that was supposed to be a client check-in. I scanned the room quickly. They weren't hard to spot. Alex, Ford, and Maya were tucked away in a semi-private booth in the back, exactly where the calendar entry promised, the corner booth. Alex was leaning forward, his elbows on the table, a look of intense, conspiratorial focus on his face. Maya was laughing, tossing her vibrant red hair back, her hand briefly touching his forearm in a gesture that was definitively not professional. They both had drinks, martinis, the kind that take a while to make, suggesting they'd been there a few minutes already. I felt a surge of cold fury, not the hot, blinding kind, but the controlled, surgical kind. This wasn't a misunderstanding, this was a deliberate choice to deceive. My presence, thanks to the reply I had sent from Alex's laptop, sure, my wife's coming too, was about to throw a giant, undeniable wrench into their private evening. I walked toward their booth, moving with a deliberate calm that belied the earthquake happening inside me. As I got closer, I could hear their hushed conversation, snippets of company gossip and personal plans, confirming this was absolutely not a client meeting. The moment they saw me, everything stopped. Alex was the first to look up, sensing a presence. His face, usually so open and expressive, went through 3 rapid stages: confusion, then dawning horror, and finally, a sort of trapped, cornered panic. He actually physically recoiled, knocking his martini glass slightly. Maya's reaction was slower but more telling. She simply froze, the laughter draining from her face, replaced by that same defensive annoyance I saw in her text message. Seriously? She glanced at Alex, a flash of pure betrayal in her eyes, clearly thinking he had led me here. I stopped right beside their table, looking down at them. I didn't sit. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just stood there, letting my presence fill the space, an immovable object crashing into their comfortable little secret. "Hi, guys," I said, my voice unnervingly cheerful and steady. "Am I late for the big client check-in?" Alex stumbled over his words. "Rosa, what are you doing here? I thought you were at home. I told you I was working late." He was already launching into his denial, his default defense mechanism. "I know what you told me, honey," I replied, my eyes locked on his, refusing to let him look away. "But I realized I needed to check in, too. You know, since you graciously invited me to join your little meeting tonight." I let the word graciously hang in the air, heavy with sarcasm. Maya finally found her voice, sharp and cold. "Alex, what is she talking about? Did you tell her I was here?" Alex turned his panic on her. "No, of course not. Rosa, this is just a quick, emergency work discussion about the new Q4 projections. Nothing for you to worry about." He was laying the lie on thick, waving his hands dismissively, trying to contain the damage. Remember the crocodile dung sunscreen joke? There was zero humor in the air now. "Emergency work discussion, huh?" I smiled, a completely false, brittle expression. "Funny, that's not what I got from the message." You know, the one you forgot to delete from your chat with Maya this afternoon. That was the key. He flinched, remembering he had left his laptop open at the work from arcade office. He suddenly understood that I had seen the initial message. Same time tonight? But he still didn't realize the extent of my deception. I don't know what you're talking about, Rosa. It was probably about the budget meeting, he stammered, his eyes darting wildly. He was trying desperately to keep the narrative controlled. I leaned in closer, my voice dropping to a theatrical whisper that still cut through the synth-pop music. No, Alex. The message I saw was same time tonight. And I replied from your computer, honey. I said, sure. My wife's coming too. The revelation was absolute. It shattered the illusion of his control and exposed the lie of his innocence. Maya shot Alex a look that could curdle milk. His betrayal of her, by supposedly including me, was now completely clear. Alex stared at me, his jaw slack, the color draining from his face. He knew he was caught, not just in the act of meeting her, but in the elaborate, months-long lie of their just friends status. The denial had crumbled. The rising drama was about to peak, and I still had my final, undeniable piece of leverage tucked safely in my purse. The air in the corner booth was thick with disbelief, a sticky silence that smothered the background music. Alex's face was a masterpiece of stunned horror. Maya looked from him to me, her own betrayal evident, but her defenses were already going up. She hadn't realized I was the one who sent the text, but the revelation that I knew everything had her reeling. You went on my laptop? Alex finally managed, his voice a tight, strangled whisper. He was still trying to focus on my minor deception rather than his major one. The denial and deflection were textbook. Yes, Alex, I did. I said calmly, looking him dead in the eye. And I saw the message. Same time tonight? I sent the reply. Sure. My wife's coming too. I wanted to see what kind of work meeting you two were having that couldn't possibly include me. I gestured to the 2 martini glasses on the table. Looks like I found out. Not exactly a boardroom scenario, is it? Maya, sensing Alex was failing spectacularly at damage control, stepped in, her professional composure kicking in despite the visible panic. Rosa, this is incredibly unprofessional. We were discussing a delicate client matter that Alex didn't want the whole office knowing about. We work closely. That's it. You are completely overreacting. She even managed a condescending roll of her eyes, appealing to the very professional boundary she'd been secretly violating. Overreacting. I let the word hang, sharp and cold. Is that what you call months of secretive texting, coded calendar entries, and the total erosion of trust in my marriage? And all under the guise of the laid-back work from arcade office culture? I don't think so, Maya. I call it a conflict of interest and a major violation of company policy. This brought the conversation back to the professional level, which was my intended move. Alex tried to cut me off, standing up quickly. Rosa, stop. We are leaving. We will discuss this at home. You can't just come here and make a scene. No, Alex. We are absolutely not leaving, I asserted, stepping back just enough to keep a physical distance. Because the time for discussing this at home ended when you lied to me about your friendship. The scene is necessary because the secrecy was deliberate. I reached into my small clutch purse. The movement was slow and deliberate. I pulled out the piece of paper, the simple, official printout of the HR confirmation email. It wasn't flashy. It didn't look like evidence. It looked like paperwork. I didn't just come here with my feelings, Alex. I continued, holding the paper up, keeping it folded so they couldn't immediately read the text. I came here with a professional document. Before I left the office today, I filed an anonymous report with HR. Both of them stared at the paper as if it were a bomb with a ticking fuse. The revelation of the HR filing was the ultimate betrayal of their secrecy, the true turning point that changed the nature of the crisis from personal to professional. What? Alex choked out, the color draining even further from his face. All the bluster and denial vanished, replaced by a pure, terrifying realization of the consequences. A report? For what, Rosa? We didn't do anything. Oh, I think you did, I countered, my voice dangerously soft. The report is not based on what may or may not be happening between your sheets, Alex. It's based on your months of behavior, the the creation of a toxic, uncomfortable work environment, the clear conflict of interest between two employees on a high-stakes project, and the misuse of company resources to conduct clandestine meetings. I unfolded the paper and held it so they could see the official company letterhead and the case number, though not the full text. The case is already active, filed under inappropriate workplace relationship and conflict of interest. The investigation is now pending. Maya's composure shattered. This wasn't just a scorned wife, this was a formal accusation with corporate ramifications. Her career, her reputation in the small world of the work from arcade office, was now on the line. You filed an HR complaint? You did this to hurt me, Maya whispered, her eyes wide with shock. No, Maya. I filed a report because you and Alex hurt my marriage through your unprofessional, deceitful conduct. I corrected her. And more importantly, I filed it to protect myself because Alex kept dismissing my concerns as overreacting. This way, the company can determine whether your behavior violates policy. It's objective, it's procedural, and it started at 5:30 p.m. today. I placed the printout gently on the table between their martinis. It was the physical manifestation of their professional consequences. I'm not staying for the client check-in, I concluded, looking squarely at Alex, whose face was now a mask of defeat. I just wanted to make sure you both knew that the consequences for your choices began before you even ordered your first drink. Enjoy your professional conversation. And with that, I turned and walked out of the corner booth, leaving them trapped in the consequences of their lie, staring at the small, devastating piece of paper. Stepping out of the corner booth and into the cool evening air felt like emerging from a long, suffocating dive. I left behind two people staring in abject horror at an administrative printout, their secretive world utterly dismantled. The HR report, my insurance policy, had worked instantly. It transformed my personal heartbreak into an undeniable professional problem for both Alex Ford and Maya. My walk back to the car was not triumphant, but it was incredibly clear. There were no tears, no shouts, just the sharp, painful finality of realizing my marriage was over. I had forced the truth to materialize, and the truth was that Alex had chosen a lie and a work colleague over me. His first reaction in the bar wasn't guilt for the lie, but fear over his career, the immediate attempt to deflect by attacking my action of checking his laptop. That confirmed everything I needed to know about his priorities. The next morning, the work from arcade office felt different. It was the same space, the same clatter of pinball machines and the smell of coffee, but the underlying atmosphere was taut, electrified. News travels fast in a shared office space, even without formal announcements. The fact that Alex and Maya hadn't shown up for their usual morning routines spoke volumes. I sat at my desk, focusing with superhuman effort on the organic dog treat logo, waiting. I knew the HR process was procedural and usually discreet, but the emotional fallout was impossible to contain. Around 10 a.m., Alex called. It wasn't his usual cheerful, "Good morning, sweetie." His voice was hollow, stripped of all its easy confidence. "Rosa, where are you?" he asked. "I'm at my desk, Alex," I replied, my voice strictly professional. "Where are you?" "I'm at home. HR called me in before I even left. They've put me on immediate administrative leave, pending investigation." He sounded devastated, not because he missed me, but because he was facing consequences. They said it was because of a reported conflict of interest involving Maya. I didn't let him off the hook. "Yes, Alex. The report was filed yesterday afternoon, just before you two met for your client check-in martinis. I told you I filed it. Why, Rosa? Why would you do this? This is our livelihood. This is insane. We were just having drinks. You've ruined my career over and overreaction." The denial was back, laced with panic and a shocking lack of accountability. He was trying to pivot the blame back onto my deception. "Stop, Alex." I cut him off, the years of bottled-up frustration giving my voice an unwavering firmness. "You're still lying. You're lying to me. You're lying to yourself, and now you're lying to the HR department. This isn't about me overreacting. It's about you lying for months and creating a hostile situation at our shared workplace. You were deceitful with your time, your intentions, and your communication. And you abused the casual environment of the work from arcade to do it. I brought in a callback to their shared joke, the ultimate symbol of their inappropriate intimacy. And if it was just a quick drink, why did Maya reply seriously when I inserted myself into the plans? Was she afraid I'd spill the beans about the crocodile dung sunscreen joke to the client? The silence on the other end of the line was the sound of his entire defense crumbling. He realized I had not only caught him, but had anticipated his every move and secured irreversible evidence of his professional misconduct, which was the final, devastating blow. He started pleading, his tone shifting from anger to desperation. "Rosa, please. I messed up. It was just flirting, maybe a few late nights, but nothing actually happened. Please, tell HR you were mistaken. Tell them you retracted the report. I can fix this. We can fix this." "No, Alex. You broke this," I stated. "And the report is anonymous, which means HR will be investigating the context of your entire relationship with Maya, not just the martini. The truth is now in the hands of the company's process, and I am not interfering. The lie ends now." I told him I was moving out that weekend, that the time for fixing this had passed. The revelation in the bar, the physical reality of seeing them together and facing their collective lie, had given me the closure I needed. The rising drama was over, only the resolution remained. I was done being the silly, overreacting wife. I was simply Rosa Ford, the person who decided to face the truth, no matter how painful, and took control of her own destiny. The immediate aftermath was a blur of logistics and cold clarity. The confrontation at the corner booth, culminating in the deployment of the HR report, had irrevocably changed everything. Alex was at home on administrative leave, and Maya was also reportedly being quietly interviewed by HR, the repercussions of their secretive friendship spreading like wildfire through the company intranet. The formal investigation moved swiftly. I learned from a neutral HR source that my anonymous report, coupled with the calendar entry and the evidence of the suggestive communication, provided clear grounds for investigating a conflict of interest and violation of professional conduct. The facts, stripped of emotion, were damning. It was the absolute, definitive end of the lie. The twist wasn't just the betrayal, or the dramatic confrontation, or even the HR filing. The true, satisfying twist was the realization that by resorting to a professional, administrative action, I had secured a resolution that a simple, tearful argument would never have achieved. Alex couldn't deny the paperwork. He couldn't deflect the corporate process. He was forced to face the objective consequences of his choices, which mattered far more to him than my subjective pain. I moved out that weekend. The scene was not dramatic. No yelling, no throwing things. Just the methodical packing of my belongings from our apartment, while Alex sat slumped on the couch, watching his career prospects evaporate. He kept alternating between remorse for the consequences and defensive indignation over my actions. "You really didn't have to ruin me, Rosa," he muttered as I taped up a box of books. "No, Alex," I corrected, closing the lid with a decisive tear of tape. "You ruined you. I just filed the necessary paperwork to get the truth out of the shadows. I exposed the lie, I didn't create it." The resolution of the plot was bittersweet. Our marriage was undeniably over. We began the process of divorce, a quiet, almost anticlimactic procedure after the high drama of the confrontation. Alex was eventually let go from the company. Not because he necessarily had a full-blown affair, but because he had repeatedly violated the conflict of interest policy and deliberately misled his superiors and colleagues about the nature of a high-stakes working relationship, the exact claims of my HR report. Maya was moved to a different department, a clear demotion and reprimand, effectively ending their secret closeness and her immediate professional advancement. I, Rosa Ford, stayed at the Work from Arcade office. Initially, it felt strange, but I quickly realized that the quirky environment, the pinball machines, and the free ice cream were just a backdrop. The environment hadn't betrayed me, people had. And now that the truth was exposed and the liars were gone, the office felt lighter, cleaner. I was no longer fighting a phantom in the hallways. I was just working. I learned a profound lesson from this whole chaotic situation. When facing a lie that is protected by denial and gaslighting, you must change the rules of the game. You can't fight deception with tears. You have to fight it with facts, with leverage, and with undeniable reality. My deceit, replying to the text, was the key that turned the lock, but the HR report was the final, devastating turn that secured my release. The story ends not with revenge, but with closure. I am rebuilding one day at a time. The lingering question is not if I will ever trust again, but how I will define trust in my next relationship. I will never again mistake a breezy, just a friend, for an honest commitment. I look back on that desperate, frantic Tuesday afternoon, standing over Alex's open laptop, and I know I did what I had to do. I chose self-respect over comfortable denial. If you love this story about standing up for yourself and demanding the truth, please take a moment to hit that like button, subscribe for more stories, and drop a comment below letting me know what you would have done in my situation. The world didn't stop spinning just because Alex Ford was placed on administrative leave and Maya was facing a disciplinary review. Life, even the chaotic one in the work from arcade office, simply adjusted to the new reality. My colleagues, bless their discreet little hearts, didn't pry. They knew something had happened. The sudden, simultaneous disappearance of 2 key team members from a high-visibility project was a corporate alarm bell that even the loud thwack of the pinball machine couldn't drown out. But they respected my silent, stone-cold professional demeanor. The consequences were far-reaching and entirely procedural, which was precisely the victory I had orchestrated. This wasn't about me winning a petty argument. It was about the system validating my perception of the truth. The HR investigation into the conflict of interest continued, focusing not on whether they kissed, but on the fact that Alex had repeatedly misrepresented his relationship with Maya to clients, team members, and implicitly, to the company itself, all while collaborating on critical company intellectual property. The administrative leave turned into a termination for Alex. His engineering firm, protective of its corporate image and fearful of legal liability, decided to sever ties. I heard about the final decision through a neutral source. It was cold, clean, and irreversible. Alex didn't lose his job because he hurt my feelings. He lost it because he violated corporate ethics and trust. That distinction was the final, crucial closure I needed. He had to face the professional fallout of his choices, which, in his world, was the ultimate punishment. As for Maya, she was transferred to a remote, low-profile team, effectively grounding her high-flying career trajectory. The penalty was significant, a public, professional shaming that was impossible to lie her way out of. She wasn't just Alex's friend anymore. She was the co-star in a corporate compliance case. My personal life was simultaneously being dismantled and rebuilt. I spent that week quietly separating our finances, boxing up the physical remnants of our 10-year life, and finding a small, sunny apartment a few neighborhoods away. The emotional consequences were, naturally, devastating. I grieved not just for the loss of Alex, but for the loss of the future I thought we had, the quiet, comfortable certainty of coming home to a trustworthy partner. One evening, I stayed late at the office. The work from arcade was completely silent, the neon lights of the machines casting long, lonely shadows. I walked over to where Alex's desk used to be. It was already cleared, sterilized, ready for the next unsuspecting employee. It was a blank slate. I sat in his old chair, the leather still slightly molded to his shape, and finally, I allowed myself to cry. It wasn't a hysterical cry. It was a slow, quiet torrent of tears for the years of effort and love that had been tainted by his quiet, self-serving deceit. I cried for the naive Rosa, who believed that a decade of shared history made her immune to betrayal. And then I stopped. The tears washed away the last of the denial. I was no longer the victim. I was the agent of my own clarity. The emotional closure didn't come from Alex's apologies, which were always conditional and self-pitying, but from my own decisive action. Remember the HR report? That piece of paper didn't just end his job, it ended his power over my mind. Alex had reached out multiple times, alternating between furious accusations, "You ruined everything," and tearful bargaining, "We can still fix this, Rosa." I blocked his number and switched to email only, keeping every communication brief, direct, and focused only on the legal necessities of the divorce. I refused to engage with his emotional manipulation, recognizing it as the same kind of deflection he used at the corner booth. My primary focus shifted to the future. I found a new sense of pride in my work, pouring my energy into the design projects that had once seemed mundane. The final, powerful consequence was my realization of self-worth. I proved to myself that I would not tolerate being lied to, and that I possessed the strength and intelligence to navigate a crisis with strategic precision, even if it meant resorting to a bold deception. The entire experience had been a harsh lesson in boundaries and self-trust. I walked away from the marriage with less money, but with infinitely more self-respect. The final, quiet resolution was accepting that I had done the right thing, the necessary thing, to cut out a corrosive lie and claim my peace. I was ready to close the loop on this painful chapter. I was standing at the edge of the break room at the work from arcade office, pouring a cup of coffee that tasted mercifully strong, when the final piece of emotional closure clicked into place. 6 weeks had passed since the night at the corner booth. Alex was officially out of the company, the divorce papers were filed, and Maya was a ghost in a remote department I never saw. The storm had passed, leaving behind a profound stillness. The lingering question, the one that used to haunt me during sleepless nights, was about trust. How could I ever open myself up again after such a calculated, sustained deception? The answer, I realized, was not to trust others less, but to trust myself more. I thought back to the moment I saw that cryptic text. Same time tonight. I could have ignored my gut feeling. I could have waited, wept, and confronted him without proof, allowing him to easily spin the narrative against me. But I didn't. I trusted my instinct, and I acted with a strange, cold precision. I chose to fight a lie with a necessary, surgical deception, proving to myself that I was resilient and resourceful. My self-respect had become my ultimate boundary. The whole saga of Alex and Maya, and the casual cruelty that flourished in the relaxed, boundaryless culture of the arcade office, had fundamentally changed my perspective on relationships. I learned that infidelity isn't always a dramatic, fire and brimstone event. Sometimes it's a slow, quiet erosion built on a foundation of small lies, like repeatedly saying she's just a friend while planning clandestine meetings. Remember the crocodile dung sunscreen joke? It was one small piece of shared intimacy that excluded me, and it became a symbol of everything I had dismissed as harmless. I will never dismiss those small signs again. I was no longer fixated on the betrayal itself, but on the strength it took to expose it. The act of filing that HR report was the ultimate affirmation of my self-worth. It was me saying, my peace and professional stability matter more than your comfort with your lie. The professional consequence he faced was the universe balancing the scales of accountability. In the weeks that followed, I made a conscious effort to reclaim the fun and quirkiness of the work from arcade office for myself. I started joining the occasional pinball tournament, not to socialize, but just to play, focusing on the flashing lights and the satisfying thwack of the flippers. It was a meditative practice, a way to focus on a tangible, objective goal instead of the messy, subjective reality of human relationships. One day, one of the newer employees, who knew nothing of the drama, walked past my desk and stopped. "Hey, Rosa," she said cheerfully. "You look really focused. You're always so calm. You're like the least stressed person in this office." I smiled, a genuine, easy smile that reached my eyes. "It took a lot of work to get this calm," I replied honestly. "I just learned how to trust the process, and I learned that clarity, even when painful, is always better than comfortable denial." The divorce papers were finalized a few weeks later. Alex sent one last, lengthy email, filled with a mix of regret for the consequences he faced and a begrudging acknowledgement that I had been stronger than he gave me credit for. I deleted it without replying. His validation was irrelevant. I didn't need him to confirm my strength. I had already proven it to myself in the corner booth. I closed this painful, long chapter of my life by taking a quiet, symbolic step. I opened up my personal shared drive and deleted the folder I had created that contained all the evidence, the screenshots, and the official HR confirmation email. The truth was out, the consequences were delivered, and the documentation was no longer needed. The past was fully archived. My path forward is clear. Rebuild my life with the knowledge that I am my own strongest protector. I faced betrayal head-on, used my wits to force accountability, and walked away with my integrity intact. That is the greatest victory. The story ends not with a happily ever after, but with a resilient, I am whole again. I am Rosa Ford, and I am ready for whatever comes next, armed with a newfound self-trust that no one can ever take away. If you love the story about standing up for yourself and demanding the truth, please take a moment to hit that like button, subscribe for more stories, and drop a comment below letting me know what you would have done in my situation.